Happy Monday. This is Jameson Mitchell, your intuitive guidance counselor, here with your week in tarot. And this week, I'm going old school, and I'm going to be using the original Rider Waite Tarot. And so, if you've been regularly following my videos, you know that I normally take the deck and separate it into 3 piles. But I felt like I wanted to do something different. I felt like it was time for a change. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be shuffling the deck and pulling 3 cards, and still kind of keeping with the idea of the first card is going to be the theme or the tone for the week. The second card is going to be what is Tarot asking us to consider in terms of guidance or advice. It's going to empower us to move through the week. And then the final card will be, if we consider the advice that Tarot is giving us, what would be a possible outcome for the week? So having said that, I'm going to take the deck. I'm going to shuffle till I feel led to pull a card. That's our first card right there. That is the second. And that's the third. Okay, now there's a few cards there, so we may have more than 3 this week. So, because I always consider when a card jumps out the way they have, that's significant. So we'll look at those. Okay, so going with the first 3. So first card is the Hanged Man. Okay, so even though I try to depart from my norm, the first card is a Major Arcana card. So Major Arcana cards carry more weight in a reading when they show up. They usually, for me, represent spiritual influences, psychological factors, a life lesson that's being experienced through the week. So the Hanged Man is all about perspective, and he's about looking at things differently. He's hanging upside down from a tree, which enables him to see the world in a different way than he would be if he was standing on his feet upright. So this week we're being asked to think about how we can look at our situations differently, especially if you feel like you're stuck, if you feel like you're in limbo, if you feel like, you know, nothing's going on. One of the things that I've always learned from a spiritual perspective is that even when it looks like nothing's happening, something is happening. And it also reminds me of the theme of sacrifice. And sacrifice with the Hanged Man is voluntary sacrifice. He makes a sacrifice because he knows in some way it will enable him to grow spiritually. And the sacrifice here is more of an internal process because he's not doing anything physical. I mean, his hands are behind his back. So the fact that we can't see his hands, and hands symbolically represent activity, would suggest that it's an internal exercise, or it's an internal process, not necessarily something we have to do externally. It also reminds me of a quote that I just posted on my Facebook page earlier today, and it was about sacrifice. And so it's from Mark Nepo. So the quote goes this: sacrifice is giving up what no longer works. I'm going to say that again. Sacrifice is giving up what no longer works. And so this week we're being asked to consider, if you want to sacrifice something, sacrifice being what would you be willing to give up that no longer serves and supports you this week. So that's our theme, the Hanged Man. So now the next card is the Queen of Swords. I love this. Even though I tried to depart from my normal routine, Tarot said, So now the Queen of Swords is a court card or a person card. So if you've been following my videos long enough to know that this is how I usually do it. The Major Arcana card is usually the theme, and then the court card is usually the approach. So having said that, the Queen of Swords is all about, just like I said with the Hanged Man, she's all about letting things go. She's all about cutting things out of her life, removing things, and coming from a place of being more authentic, or authenticity being the theme with that. I could almost tripped up on my words there. Going with that, then the Hanged Man is all about being who you are. The Hanged Man is all about expressing who you are from a place of owning your uniqueness, owning what makes you different. This is about marching to the beat of a different drum. And going with the Queen of Swords, she's all about removing all the things that are false. Typically in some images, because I'm seeing it in my head, so typically in some images in some of my other tarot decks, she's holding like a mask or a head. which represents eliminating those false identities or those false ideas that keep us from being who we truly are. So, two things going on here. It's about the art of voluntary sacrifice, letting go what you no longer need, that's no longer supporting you. And then the Queen of Swords is about how can you do that in a way that allows you to stand in your uniqueness and be more authentic. So those are two cards here. Now, if we go with that, then this would be the outcome. Okay. Now, the Eight of Cups is our outcome. So the Eight of Cups is all about embarking on a spiritual journey. So going with the Hangman here at the beginning, the Eight of Cups says that this journey is something that we will have to do alone. There's a solitary figure here, and he's walking away. And the cups here that are stacked up is all the things that he or she needs to do in order to get their lives in order or balance to move forward. It's also about moving into what's considered unfamiliar territory or the unknown, because we don't know where he or she is going. And so having to trust that process. It's about walking away from what's familiar to walking towards what's uncertain. It's a new phase in your life. And so the thing about it is sometimes we have to learn to let go and let God with the Hangman and trust the process. You know, sometimes some of us, and I'm guilty of this myself, is that we tend to want to only move in directions in which we know where we're going and we know how things are going to turn out. It's like we want the certainty, we want the guarantee, and life doesn't always work that way. So the other thing about the Eight of Cups is about letting go of what you no longer need and that is no longer important to you, going with the first two cards. But this card carries with it the toxic things, like the toxic people, the toxic environments, the toxic situations, the things that really are not in your best interest and may be actually affecting your physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental well-being. The 8 on this card is a number of personal power. So going with that, it's like in this process of sacrifice and letting go what you no longer need, no longer supports you, it's an act of reclaiming your personal power. So how can you do that this week? So now we have 2 extra cards that fell out with the Eight of Cups. So we're going to look and see what these cards are. So our first card here is the Queen of Cups. So now we have 2 queens here. Queens as a theme represent caring and nurturing. So how can we be more caring? How can we be more nurturing? How can we be more loving to ourselves? The thing I find interesting with the Queen of Swords and the Queen of Cups is that Swords represents mental activity and Cups represents our feelings, our emotions, how we relate to people. So it's very interesting. So it's about the unification, if you will, of your heart and your mind. It's about balance here. You know, there are 2 types of people in the world. They're what we call the thinkers, and they're ruled by their minds and their intellects. And then there are the feelers who are ruled by their heart and their feelings and their emotions. But we're both aspects of that. So these 2 as a combination are asking us, how can we bring that more into balance? Now, with the Hanged Man, the Queen of Cups is asking us to honor our intuition this week. What is your intuition telling you? And intuition is ruled by how we feel. So it's about checking in with how you feel right off the bat. When I'm working with people and we're talking about intuitive development, the first thing I ask them to do is to learn how your intuition speaks to you. And one of the ways it speaks to us is through our feelings. So this is about what do we need to consider in our art of letting go mentally, but also too from an emotional place. Okay, so that's the Queen of Cups. And then the other card is the Knight of Swords. Boy, there is a lot of court cards. So there's a lot of different approaches that Tarot is asking us to consider this week. Now, the Knight of Swords is a card that can suggest to some extent that we sometimes may be looking at life as a battle, as a challenge, that we're constantly having to be on guard, constantly having to fight to get through things. So if that is true for you, asking yourself, what do you get out of the idea of looking at life from that perspective? The other thing about this card is it normally is about doing something swiftly, doing something hastily, doing something on impulse, which is kind of the exact opposite of the Hanged Man. So it could be, with the Hanged Man here being the overall theme, it could be, what do we need to kind of put the brakes on? If you're normally going, and you're rushing into things, or you're moving about really quickly in your world, how can you step back? How can you take some time out? How can you learn the art of slowing down? Okay, so I'm going to go over the cards again. Summing up, the Hanged Man is all about looking at life from a different perspective, learning the art of sacrifice, which is giving up what no longer works in your life. Queen of Swords, following the Hanged Man, is taking that process one step further. What can you eliminate from your life? What can you remove that will allow you to be more of who you are, to be authentic, to be comfortable in your own skin? Going back to the Hanged Man being about marching to the beat of your own drum and embracing what makes you different and unique. And then the Eight of Cups is asking us to consider, as we're moving forward, who are the people that we need to let go of? What are the environments that we need to move away from? What are the circumstances we need to finally say, I've had enough, this is no longer working, and it's time to move on, even if we don't know where we're going for sure. This card is about moving on. It's time to move on. Queen of Cups, honoring your intuition this week. And then the Knight of Swords, taking a moment to step back and consider or reconsider how you're actively engaging in life. If you're looking at life as a constant battle or a challenge, and if you're rushing through life, this card is asking you to take a step back and consider slowing down if that's possible this week. So these are your cards for this week. This has been your Week in Tarot. I am James Himm Mitchell, your intuitive guidance counselor, and I look forward to sharing this space here again with you next week. And until then, have a tarot-tastic week and take care.